Welcome to another episode. What are you reading? What are you writing? A weekly video podcast features creatives, writers, and readers, and we come together to talk about books. I am your host, Karen E. Osborne, author of 4 novels and counting. I am so glad you're here. I think you're going to enjoy our next guest. I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. It turns out we have so many things in common. Who knew? So I want you to meet James Foley. Hey, James.
Hey, how are you, Karen?
I am awesome. Let me tell you a little bit about James. So he has a new thriller and it's called Treasure Coast. And it comes out in just a couple of days, right? You're almost on pub day, which is so
Yep.
exciting. Um,
Finally, so close. Yeah.
I know it takes forever. He traded in a very successful career for a life. I'm just going to read this to you. Uh, he traded a successful career in business for a life on a barrier island working with sick and injured sea turtles. We want to hear about that. He found the inspiration for Treasure Coast when packages of illegal narcotics washed up on a local beach. James currently resides in San Diego, California, with his wife Suzanne, and where he has discovered the joys of tequila and live music at large venues, and where he lost his beautiful dog Marley, who is in his book and on his website. So we'll hear all about that. So, James, so first of all, I have to tell
Yes,
everybody his book is called Treasure Coast, and that's where I live. I live on the
correct.
Treasure Coast. So, well, it turns out he was born in the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx. There's so many parallels here. That's so cool. Um, Tell us first about leaving your business world
Yeah.
to care for turtles, sea turtles, and become a writer. Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, it's not as it wasn't as linear as it might sound. I stopped working full time and I initially consulted with startup clients, which is something I love. And I did that for a little while. Until I'd had enough. And then I went on and went full on with the sea turtles, which led me also to become very involved in the environmental issues affecting the Treasure Coast in South Florida. Um, when and then after it was only after that I found writing. And initially it was, well, let's see if you can do this kind of a thing, and then it became a passion, and it's remained a passion, probably something I'll do for the rest of my life. So it was a big transition, but that's how it is. Life has chapters, just like books.
That's really true. I remember when I gave up my career and I thought, oh, I'm not going to be Karen Osborne anymore.
Right.
I'm not going to be that known quantity that people were always so glad to see. And then I started writing and it's turned out it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I like this new Karen.
Right. Well, it's your identity, or at least my identity, was completely wrapped up in my career, and I was one of those people who worked all the time. So it was a big change, but a welcome one, and a needed one. I've known for years and years and years from visiting the Treasure Coast, from visiting South Florida, that I was just enchanted with those sea turtles, and so I couldn't wait to get started on those activities, and getting involved in that every which way I could.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And
Did you
yeah,
drag your wife through all of this or did she willingly go?
she willingly went. Our 40th anniversary is at the end of this month, and so when you're together that long, you sort of become the same person in a lot of ways.
It's
And
true.
so, yeah, it is true. So, with respect for the sea turtles, where I was working in a hospital, doing, helping the veterinarians, doing that kind of stuff, she's an educator. She was a school teacher, so she became a docent and talked to tourists and that kind of thing. And then we did some things together, taking people out to see nesting sea turtles at night, and finding them and excavating their eggs and all that. So we had quite a time of it together, doing those kinds of things.
That
Now
sounds
that we're out,
wonderful.
yeah, now that we're out here, she's painting her pictures. She's an artist
Oh,
and
she's a
working.
painter.
She is. She's
Oh,
a painter, and she also does pottery, and she's doing that, and I'm writing
you're
books.
writing.
So there you
So
go.
what's her
Yeah.
name?
Her name's Suzanne.
Suzanne. That's right. I did say that.
Yeah,
Suzanne.
yeah.
Suzanne is painting. So, um, tell us about the premise of, I love this, this drugs came up on the beach and now you're writing this mystery.
Yeah.
So tell us about, do you have a copy of the book yet?
I don't have a top copy of the book yet to show,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is
that's cool.
yeah. But
Yeah. So
the premise
tell us
of the
about it.
premise of yeah, sure. The idea came to me. You had mentioned when narcotics washed up on the beach. We lived right on the beach when we lived in Florida, and so it was not uncommon for all kinds of things to wash up. Sometimes it might be narcotics. Sometimes it might be what they call square groupers. Do you know what that is? Bales of marijuana. Sometimes it might be some kind of a boat wreck. Sometimes it was immigrants, people fleeing Cuba or Haiti. It was all kinds of things. So it wasn't unusual, but it did get me thinking. So I had just mentioned the whole sea turtle thing. We were talking about that a little bit. Those activities kept me out on the beaches late into the night, like well past midnight sometimes. And the beach is absolutely gorgeous then. It's so dark and the stars are at their brightest and the water glistens under the moon. And in the horizon, you see the cruise ships. They look like little diamonds. It's just gorgeous. It's also scary as hell
Mm.
because you don't know who or what you might run into. You're out there all alone looking for some turtles that may or may not be there. And so those thoughts and those experiences, along with that package that washed up, well, I wrote a book about it. So, sea
So what's the
turtles and
premise?
narcotics. The premise is basically this: the main character is a homicide detective whose name is Lisa Owens, and Lisa is sad and brokenhearted. Basically,
Mm.
she was had a fiance who was murdered. The investigation was bungled by the police, and she's been having to live without answers. To try to make some sense of her fiance's murder, she became a cop herself. And now she finds herself in
Mm.
the interesting position of being a homicide detective who doesn't trust other cops because she doesn't
Mm.
trust that they'll do their jobs right and solve the crimes. So she gets knocked down again when her lifelong friend, an elderly lady who it was a mentor and a former school teacher of hers, is inexplicably murdered. And it's a brutal murder, which makes no sense. And Lisa just cannot afford to go with leaving that unsolved and going through life again. And she doesn't trust the local police because the murder happened on a tiny barrier island off of the Treasure Coast. Sounds familiar. And so she's out of her jurisdiction now. She's a detective in Miami, so she has to go it alone. She sort of launches her own kind of stealth operation, her
Mm.
own secret investigation, and in doing so, she ends up in the crosshairs of the most dangerous criminals she's ever encountered, and among people who will change her forever. So that's the story.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. That sounds like a really good story. I love thrillers. I write them and I love reading them.
I love reading them too. I love,
Yes,
see, it's another thing we have in common. See?
yes, yes. So that sounds really good. I was intrigued that you created an island. You know,
Right.
that you created you had to do a little world building for yourself. And just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the truth is, I didn't do much creating. I knew I wanted to set the story on Hutchinson Island in the town of Stewart, where I lived. But those are small places, and this is a crime thriller, and bad things happen. And I didn't want to necessarily taint the area with anything. And some of the characters are loosely based on real people, and so I just changed the names of the places. I've given clues, lots of clues as to where this really is happening, but that's really why I changed those names. And sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. But the descriptions of the area and its beauty and its natural environment, those are those are all very much
It's real.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I did something very similar. I created a town that two of my books are set in, but it was after another. You know, if you read it, you
yeah,
pretty much know what
right.
what
Yeah,
if you're a person that lives in Westchester, you'd recognize where it is. But again, I wanted to be able to make stuff up, and it's just so much easier to
right,
have,
right.
yeah, to just
Yeah.
create my own world. So you oh, that's what I wanted to know.
What?
So what so when this really happened, these things that get washed up, like the
Yeah,
narcotics, not in your book, but in real life, did you
yeah.
ever find out like what happened, or did you ever know what and that
You
find
don't.
its way into your plot at all?
Yeah, oh yes, it's very much in my plot. Um, the packages of narcotics are obviously being, brought into the country that way by boat. And what often happens is, if the Coast Guard is alerted to it, and there's all kinds of protections in place and defenses in place from the departments in charge of all of that. Uh, they'll just throw the drugs off the boats, and that's probably what happened. I've taken that a little further in my book and come up with an interesting twist on it, which I think readers will really enjoy and find interesting. But that's really what happens, and there's a lot that comes in, to the country that way, right? So it's just an interesting kind of thing.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a book I definitely need to read. Is it also an audiobook? Is it going to come out in audio?
Yeah, our publisher, has said that he expects that to happen, wants to make that happen. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So it'll be
Cool. I love
audio, it'll be
audiobooks.
an ebook. Yeah, yeah,
So you mentioned your protagonist, and you said that she was, that her husband was brutally killed, and now her friend is killed, and so she has this sadness in her. What else can you tell us about her as a human being? What are some of the things that you really like about her as a person?
Well, here's the thing. Lisa is sad, rightfully so, given what she's had to endure. And but she's not broken. A lot of
Hmm.
stories where a detective is the protagonist or the main character, that person is really, really morose and dark and damaged. And that's not Lisa. Lisa still has a light about her. And I think that's what I love about her the most. She's has trust issues with her colleagues. She's a workaholic. She's headed toward burnout, all those things, but she continues to have a brightness about her, a light about her. And I think that the reason for that is deep down, she's driven by love. And I think that's why readers will really want to cheer for her and root for her. I know I do. She's the kind of person who I'd really like to know.
We do love our characters, don't we?
I do.
Flawed
I'm in
as they
love. Yeah.
are, we
Yes.
love them
Floyd.
so much. Now, there's a
Exactly.
second book, right? You finished this
Yes. Yes.
book, and it's out in 2 days. And so you're hoping that the second book will come out sometime soon. What can our watchers look for? Tell us a little bit about the second book.
Oh, it's a twisty thriller too. It's a continuation of the first story, with some of the same characters that I think readers will be so happy to see again. But basically, what happens is Lisa has moved on from Miami and she now works as an investigator with the FBI. And she's part of an elite team. And what happens in that story is I'm just trying to think how I want to tell it. But what
Yeah,
happens
you
in
have to
that
tell us the
story,
whole thing.
yeah. What happens in that story basically is the homes of three prominent Black members of Congress are bombed. And this becomes a case that Lisa and her team catches. And Lisa, who's normally somebody who has to do everything herself because she doesn't trust anyone else to do it right, all of a sudden feels completely like she has imposter syndrome. She feels self doubt. And the whole nation is watching because this case has broad implications. Her team, incredibly talented bunch, they uncover a hate group in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. And so they head to the mountains to investigate and try to bring justice. And in doing so, they get a lot more than they were expecting. And they need to really first unwind a horrible, horrible legacy that happened 30 years ago, and has left the whole area with a stigma, a bloody stigma of hate. So the the uh, the all the books have themes. The first book in Florida was greed, and I can tell you more about that in a second. This second book that I just told you about, obviously, is about hate and racism, and it's a real good twisty one, and I'm very
I
proud of
hope
it.
we get to read
So
that one soon as
yeah,
well. So this
yeah, yeah,
show is called What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? So we always like
right.
to leave our watchers with book recommendations. So can you tell us any books that you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. There are two that come to mind. One I just recently discovered, an Irish crime thriller writer, Tana French, and her books are just so beautifully written. Her descriptions are so compelling. Her characters are so well developed that these are books for people who love the genre, and she's written several who love the genre, but who really appreciate and love gorgeous writing. And I'm so jealous of how she writes. So there's that one. And then another one is a book called Saving Miles that I don't think a lot of people would have heard about. It's written by a local author out here in San Diego who I came to know through the Sisters in Crime work and a local Sisters in Crime partner. They call it Partners in Crime in San Diego. And it's set in San Diego and in Tijuana. And I think anyone who has know someone is raising or who has raised a troubled teen, um, will really, really, really respond to this book. It's a thriller, and it's a really good one. So those would be two I would tell your listeners to
Sounds good.
try out.
So now there are all these people watching and listening, and they want to read your books. They want to follow you. They want to, see what's going on in your writer life. And so, how can they be in touch with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, a couple different places. One is I have a website. It's james-foley.com. And then the other is I also have a Facebook page, James Foley Author. So you can find me there in those two places. And anyone looking for the books, they're everywhere where books are sold. Probably the easiest would be barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com, but your local bookstore could order it as well.
We love independent local bookstores, don't we?
We
We
do.
so
We
we
do.
so appreciate them. So I know that you're going to follow James and you're going to make sure that you get a hold of Treasure Coast. And we're so appreciative when you write reviews. We authors so appreciate it. And those early reviews are so important. So if you get this book and you read it, you be one of the first people. You just get those reviews written, which will help James so much. I thank you, James, for this wonderful time, and I thank all of you for being on. And when you do get in touch with James, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Let him know that you met him on What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? See you next week, everybody, and thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.
Thanks, Karen.